Hi, and welcome to week 9 on Chinese, Korean, and Japanese art after 1200. Part 1 is about Chinese and Korean art. Geography of connections between China, Korea, and Japan. Aside from their geographic proximity in East Asia, China, Korea, and Japan share many cultural elements. Their cultural development has been intertwined for millennia. From about the 4th century BCE, Chinese cultural elements were transmitted to Korea and then on to Japan. Agricultural innovations, metalworking, technology, and fiber art techniques are believed to have been transmitted in this way, from China to Korea and then to Japan. Perhaps most recognizable is the use of Chinese language pictograms, the kanji, in Japanese writing. While it's no longer in use, Chinese kanji were once used in Korea. Likewise, principles of styles of architecture, painting, and other forms are shared by China, Korea, and Japan, and the visual evidence will become clear within this lecture. Buddhism and Confucianism are also exported to Korea and Japan from China and incorporated into those cultures' indigenous beliefs. Due to its relationship with China and Japan, Korea has been traditionally viewed as a sort of stronghold of scholarly knowledge. While your book's section on Korea is relatively small, this should not reflect on the strength of Korea's cultural and artistic achievements. China is a culture with one of the longest standing, unbroken cultural traditions we will study in this class. Traditionally, China was called Zhuangguo, which means Middle Kingdom, by its inhabitants. The term China, used today to describe the civilization, is an ancient reference to the dynasty or emperor by the name of Qin. One very ancient practice that continues today is known as ancestor veneration or ancestor worship. This practice surfaces all over the world but is especially prevalent in North America, Oceania, Africa, and of course China. Those who practice ancestor veneration believe that one's ancestors function in a way like deities and can hold sway over the events on Earth. The ancestors' actions depend on whether or not they are pleased or displeased with the amount and degree of respect or veneration paid to them by their descendants. Today, ancestor veneration takes the form of burning paper offerings called ghost money. In Neolithic and Bronze Ages, ancestor appeasement appears to have been primarily function of funerary art. Buddhism, which traveled to China from India via Nepal, started to gain popularity in the 3rd century BCE. Before then, however, two important schools of thought emerged within China that influenced not only religion but also rulership and the social structure of China, Korea, and Japan. Taoism, a Romanized term for a practice known as Tao, or the Way, was introduced by Lao Tzu, the founder of Taoism. Lao Tzu's Tao Te Ching sets out a number of principles for a good life. These ideas include an animistic spirituality, a belief that features of nature may have something like spirits or souls. Taoism also recognizes a connection between nature and humans. Humans should follow nature. Nature should not bend to human will. Confucianism, attributed to the historical figure Confucius or Master Kong, is another belief system or system of thought that proposes another way to a good life. The foundation of Confucianism is a system of ordered societal interactions. That is, as an individual, you should know your place in society and pursue a proper relationship to those who are above and below you in rank. Confucianism, as you might imagine, was often preferred by the upper classes of China, Korea, and Japan. According to some historians, while Master Kong is said to have been a student of Lao Tzu, Taoism actually probably emerged after Confucianism, as a reaction to its social reinforcements, much like how Buddhism was formed as a counter to the strict caste system of Hinduism in India. Still, Taoism and Confucianism are not perceived as being in conflict with one another. During China's Neolithic period from about 7000 to 2250 BCE, ancient civilizations rose in the Yangtze and Yellow River valleys. Anthropologists have discovered early painted pottery cultures at Longshan and Yangshuo that date to the Neolithic era. It's during this Neolithic period that we start to see artists carving jade in shapes. Jade is the term we use today commonly to describe a number of different green stones. However, technically jade is only defined as nephrite and jadeite. Most examples of jade in China before the modern era are of nephrite, which comes in a variety of colors and is sometimes translucent and sometimes opaque, which you can see by the variety of different colors of jade I'm showing you. Nephrite and jadeite are very hard stones and difficult to work. Most of the carving on tiny jade pieces must be done by rubbing sinew back and forth over the jade surface, or by grinding the surface of the jade with particles of more jade or of a harder stone. Jade items found in burials take on some distinctive but mysterious shapes. Dragons, like this one, appear in funerary art, along with symbols such as the bee, a disc with a hole in the center. The Kong is another apparently important shape whose meaning is not entirely understood today. The Kong is a cylinder, sometimes tall or short. Sometimes the Kong is circular, like here, or it can have squared corners, which you can kind of see here. Kongs depict an ogre-like face called a Taotie mask. You can see some examples here. And this mask is believed to be protective. The Taotie mask has large eyes and a grimacing mouth, and sometimes fangs. The Taotie mask is highly similar to images of ancestor tiki found in Polynesia and ancestor totem images in northwest coastal America. For that reason, some anthropologists believe there may have been early contact between these cultures, but the nature of that contact, if it exists, is unknown. This is known as a diffusion theory, not completely unlike the Indo-Aryan migration theory discussed in the previous section. But unlike the Indo-Aryan migration theory, this diffusion theory does not suppose the superior quality of one group over another. The Taotie mask theme may also be just one of those cultural developments, like the mountain-shaped temple, that occur independently to different peoples in different parts of the world. China's Bronze Age, from about 2250 to 206 BCE, is the period marked by the presence and dominance of bronze as a material for tools, weapons, and ceremonial objects. Bronze also seems to spur social stratification in China, with a sharp class difference established between those who have bronze and those who don't. Ancestor worship or veneration continues and centers around a supreme deity, Shangdi, an original ancestor who is never portrayed in any form. In some items dating to the Bronze Age, we can see early Chinese writing. Bones were used in a ritual called scapulomancy, also known as reading oracle bones. Scapulomancy is a type of divination, which is telling the future or the truth by consulting one or more deities. In China, as elsewhere, divination is performed by a person who functions as a shaman, someone who has a unique ability to commune with the dead, with ancestors, or with gods. The scapulomancy ritual in Bronze Age China involved the truth seeker asking the diviner or shaman a question. That question would be carved into the oracle bone, which was sometimes a tortoise shell, like you see here, or an ox scapula. After being carved, the bone was then heated, and after a time it would crack. The cracking on the bone was read by the shaman or diviner. In Chinese divination, the shaman's answer comes from the ancestors. Bronze objects were often used in ancestor veneration rituals too. A number of Bronze Age ritual objects have been found in tombs. The copper-tin alloy was cast through piece mold construction, which allowed a larger or complicated bronze object to be cast in pieces and then fastened together. Vessels like these were used in cooking and serving food and drink, which then could be consumed by the ancestors. It's unclear whether these objects from tombs were always used to honor the deceased or whether the deceased would use them in his or her afterlife to continue to pay worship to the ancestors. Based on the other everyday objects found in the tomb, probably the latter. They were probably using them to venerate their own ancestors. The Qin dynasty. This dynasty, for which we call China, was the first to unify all the formerly independently run Chinese states. Emperor Qin Shi Huangdi was a despotic emperor, but established many elements of Chinese culture that we still see even in the modern period. Under Qin Shi Huangdi began the great Chinese bureaucracy, which allowed for unified law, currency, and Chinese script. The Great Wall, which formerly was disjointed and uneven, was rebuilt and expanded. Artwork and other goods were line produced in a factory-like manner. Emperor Qin Shi Huangdi is probably best known for his tomb, which is defended by terracotta warriors. You can see some of them here, here, and there. Although Qin Shi Huangdi attempted to suppress Buddhism, it gained popularity and waned in popularity at different times throughout Chinese history. Buddhist art from the Wei dynasty, like the colossal Buddha on the screen, reflects the influence of Afghanistan, of which Chinese artists would have been familiar through contact via the Silk Road. Buddhism in China starts out easily recognizable to us, with typically Indian or Nepalese-looking symbols of the Buddha, and images of bodhisattvas that resemble Indian examples as well, like this image of Guanyin here and this one here. However, the Buddhist temple changes significantly in China. The round or bell-shaped stupa of India and Southeast Asia is replaced by a wooden structure with a peaked roof and overhanging eaves. This architectural shape is believed to be quite old. For example, the features of the Tang Dynasty era Nunchun-Si temple are based on the much earlier Han Dynasty era watchtower. Because they were made of wood, no extant examples of the watchtower exist. However, models found in the Han Dynasty tombs demonstrate the peaked roof and overhanging eaves you're seeing here. In fact, though it is based on ancient principles, the Nanchun-Si is the oldest surviving wood structure in China. Other forms of Buddhism are developed in China, including Pure Land Buddhism, which seeks the Western paradise, and Chan Buddhism, which we'll discuss further below. The Song Dynasty. After brief periods of deunification, the Chinese states were once again reunified under the Song Dynasty from 960 to 1279 CE. The Song Dynasty saw the rise of the merchant middle class and prominence as government officials. The Song Dynasty is best remembered for scroll paintings in ink on silk. Shui Mo, or ink painting, was the preferred medium of the Wen Ren, or literati. The Wen Ren were people who belonged to a new upper middle class, who were government and civil service workers, but were relatively politically independent intellectuals. Shui Mo paintings by Wen Ren artists were related to Taoist and sometimes Confucian ideas. The subjects were nature, landscape, and lone contemplative figures. You can see in this example by Fan Quan. Now you can't see the whole scroll, so I'm going to change it a little bit so you can see a little better. How there are mountains in the background, some trees and rocks, and a path, and then the people are very, very small against the background. And this example by Shu Daoning, fishing in a mountain stream. Again, you see the emphasis on landscape, very quiet, very few people. Scroll paintings were spare, simplified, and monochromatic, and they tended to have a spontaneous feel to them. They often combined calligraphic text with images. Calligraphy was perceived to be just as creative as drawing and painting. Chan Buddhism, a new kind of Buddhism originating originally in India but developed in China, sought to return to a simple, original form of Buddhism. And this was also very influential on Wenren artwork. In Wei Nang chopping bamboo, which you can see here, the artist demonstrates Chan Buddhist subject matter. The same time as the artist demonstrates the contemplative power of painting and calligraphy. Chan Buddhist artists saw painting and calligraphy, like chopping bamboo, as activities that could enhance meditation and bring one closer to enlightenment. In this image, you can really see how the lines look very, very spontaneous. Perhaps what's most significant about Wenren Shuimo painting is that it was made and exchanged outside the sphere of influence of the court. Wenren artists made art for themselves and each other, for personal growth and enjoyment, without the expectation of payment. I cannot overemphasize how rare this attitude is toward art in any area of the world before the modern era. In 1279, China was overtaken by Kublai Khan and absorbed into the Mongolian Empire. Your book picks up with Kublai Khan as the new emperor of the Yuan dynasty in Beijing. The Yuan dynasty. When China becomes part of the enormous Mongolian Empire under Kublai Khan, the Wenren were initially distrusted. Yet painting continued undisturbed in the south. These well-educated artists and scholars continued to hold high social status and distinguished themselves from court or professional artists by working not for payment but for self-expression. Perhaps in response to the Mongolian occupation, Wenren or literati painters strove to find the most traditional, authentic Chinese style possible. They looked back to the Song and Tang dynasties for inspiration. In fact, artists often copied artwork of those periods. As in the Song dynasty, Wenren painters of the Yuan dynasty did not create work for public display, but rather for the private enjoyment of other members of their social class. Artists continued to paint images and calligraphy in ink on album leaves, hanging scrolls, and hand scrolls of silk or paper, all of which could be easily shared. Wenren art of the Yuan dynasty is spare and austere. They preferred simple landscapes without the need for much extra ornament, as in the Rangxi studio on the screen by Nizan. So popular was the Wenren style that even court artists, like the husband and wife pair Zhao Mengfu and Guan Daosheng, painted in that spare Shuimo style. Let's see if I can find a couple by them. I was already there. So here we have court artist Guan Daosheng and her husband Zhao Mengfu. The Ming Dynasty. The founder of the Ming Dynasty, Hongwu Emperor, drove the Mongols from China and established rule from Beijing. Hongwu Emperor was a despotic ruler not unlike Qin Shi Huangdi. He expanded the Great Wall, a project which took the lives of hundreds of thousands of workers. Like the early Yuan emperors, Ming Dynasty rulers distrusted the literati or Wenren. The civil service system was revamped and stylized to emphasize Confucian loyalty. The court style of Ming Dynasty art reflects the distrust of the Wenren. Ming court painting moved away from the simplicity of literati painting and became rich and colorful. Hundreds of birds admiring the peacocks by Yin Hong can be seen on the screen. It's not only rich and colorful in comparison with Wenren painting, it also projects a different kind of message. Hundreds of birds presents a Confucian point of view. The peacocks represent the upper classes of society, while the smaller birds represent the ordinary people who must pay respect to their betters. Personal objects made of lacquer became popular during the Ming Dynasty. I've got a couple of examples of them for you from the Ming Dynasty. Lacquer is made of a sap that's applied in layers. Lacquers build up over a base, heated to harden, and then carved. The result is essentially a natural plastic. Red lacquer was especially prized. The cinnabar red lacquer finish is possible due to the addition of mercury to the lacquer. Mercury was known to be toxic. In fact, Qin Shi Huangdi claimed to have mercury motes in his tomb for protection. But it was erroneously believed that heat neutralized the toxicity. It does not. Ming style extends to the rich objects created for the courts. Ming Dynasty porcelain was and is still highly prized for its delicate appearance and surprising strength. In China, porcelain production increased in Jingdezhen, the site of the clay-rich Gaolin Mountain. It is the Gaolin Mountain for which the kaolin clay that gives porcelain its white color is named. Jingdezhen produced porcelain for the emperor and other royalty, as well as pieces to be sold via the Silk Road. The examples on the screen show the blue underglaze that is so easily distinguishing Chinese porcelain. So you can see that the blue paints the image on the porcelain body, and then it's covered with an overglaze that's clear. And then when it's fired, the white becomes very bright. This one you can see in the arrow vase has some Arabic writing on it, and this was made for a Muslim client. During the Ming Dynasty, Wenran or literati painting continued in the south. A growing trend towards abstraction in Shuimo painting is especially exemplified by the work here of Dai Jin and Shenzhou. Qing or Manchu Dynasty, 1644 to 1911. The Qing dynasty begins with another invasion from the north, but the Manchu had already adopted many cultural elements from China and continued its artistic traditions. In practical terms, there's very little change from the Qing to the Ming dynasties, except for the establishment of Wenren landscapes painted in the orthodox style. The Wenren artists of the Qing dynasty in China expressed an antiquarianism that is familiar to the West. Landscape artists looked to the past for inspiration as they copied but never exactly mimicked images by Sung, Yuan, and Ming artists. Korean art. It is during the Three Kingdoms period in Korea from 57 BCE to 688 CE where there is most significant cultural contact with China. The Three Kingdoms were Goguryeo, Bakchi, and Silla kingdoms. As with Chinese royal burials, Korean burials from the Three Kingdoms period are rich. Several delicate objects made of hammered gold and carved jade have been discovered in Korean tombs. Buddhism and Confucianism rise in prominence during this era. As in China, Korean artists shaped their images of the Buddha after traditional Indian or Nepalese descriptions. The Maitreya or future Buddha is shown in typical Korean fashion, called Banga Sayusung, which literally means gilt bronze seated thinking Buddha. Here he is seated on the throne with elbow on knee and hand to head. Maitreya is bronze with gold leaf, which is also typical of Japanese depictions of Buddha that we'll see later. The Goryeo dynasty. The Goryeo dynasty, alternately spelled Koryo, and where the name Korea comes from, deposed the Silla kingdom in 918. In art, the Goryeo dynasty is best remembered for its celadonware ceramics. Celadonware could be stoneware or porcelain, or a combination of the two clay bodies. It was decorated with incised images or patterns, usually of naturalistic imagery with green glaze and incised design. So you can see here in this ewer, the surface is carved and then incised to look like bamboo. The Western term celadon references the multitude shades of gray-green found in Korean ceramics of this era. At first, celadonware imitated Chinese Sung-style dynasty, but during the Goryeo dynasty, celadonware shapes and decorations reflected mostly indigenous Korean shapes. The Joseon dynasty, 1392 to 1910. With the Joseon or Yi dynasty, Korea established its capital at Seoul. The royal dynasty also became a Confucian state, taking cues from the Ming dynasty in construction of its bureaucracy. This dynasty saw the introduction of a wholly Korean written language, which replaced Chinese kanji, as well as a number of technological developments detailed in your book. This long-standing dynasty also saw, as in China, periods of distrust between royalty and the upper middle class or literati, as well as invasion from from Japan and from the Manchu. In the late 19th century, a war between China and Japan over control of Korea. Perhaps the most characteristic art form of the Joseon dynasty is Bungchung-ware. This ceramics ware is made up of a stoneware clay body, and the decoration is typically blue-gray with white slip to give it the appearance of porcelain. Early Joseon dynasty Bungchung ware is incised with repeated patterns of designs, which you can see here. Later Joseon dynasty Bungchung ware is often painted rather than incised, with an iron-based pigment that has a reddish-brown appearance. Joseon dynasty ceramists also used porcelain. Some wares are painted with cobalt blue underglaze, an imitation of Ming dynasty ceramics. But another style of underglazed porcelain utilizes iron brown instead. As your book explains, between occupation by the Japanese in 1910 and World War II and the Korean War, there isn't much of an opportunity in the late 19th to mid 20th centuries in Korea for artistic activity.